Today we're going to talk about Article 1, Section 8, probably one of the most important sections of our Constitution, dealing with the powers of Congress. This is what constitutionally the Congress can do. This is the power, limiting federal government. This is the powers they have, and if they're not spelled out here, they don't have them. Let's figure out how they do what they do. So here we go, talking about the powers of Congress, the section that's probably the most powerful and most controversial one out there. This is where Congress gets their power and their authority. The powers of Congress. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So here we're talking about providing for the common defense and the general welfare, two of those issues from the preamble that we talked about that were bogging down our country. And that general welfare phrase is used a lot. It's one of the powers of Congress that they use a lot to pass laws. General welfare. Lots of stuff can fall under general welfare, and because it's such a vague term, it's pretty easy to pass a law under the general welfare clause in the Constitution. And we talk about additional powers: to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. And this one right here, among the several states, to regulate commerce among the several states, is the single biggest clause used to pass laws at the federal government level. They use the Interstate Commerce Clause more than anything else as the power to pass laws. To establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. To coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, to establish post office and post roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. This is copyright law, so this is why you can't download someone's song without paying for it. Right here in the Constitution, under the constitutional powers, that authors and inventors of things have the right to it, and you have to pay them for their stuff. To constitute tribunals inferior to the superior court. So the Supreme Court can't do everything. They can set up inferior courts. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So every 2 years, the Congress has to reauthorize spending money on our army. We don't have continual funding for the army. Every 2 years, the government has to reauthorize that. Congress has to reauthorize that. To provide and maintain a Navy. So there, the Navy doesn't have to have that done every 2 years. We can provide and maintain a Navy. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. So for common defense, again, we can call up state militia people to help fight for the federal government. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So when push comes to shove, the federal government takes control of state militias. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may, by secession of particular states, and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, and for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. That is just creating Washington, D.C. right there. So, like I said, that was the creation of Washington, D.C., our national capital. And finally, the last one, thank goodness, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. Necessary and proper, very vague term to carry in the execution of the foregoing powers. We talked about the interstate commerce, so interstate commerce is number one. Necessary and proper is probably number two. And general welfare is probably number three. But this is the biggest power in Congress to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. This is the Interstate Commerce Clause. This is how they pass 90% of their laws, probably, because things that go over state lines, the federal government can regulate according to the Constitution. And lots of stuff goes over state lines. Most everything goes over state lines. So according to the Constitution, the federal government can regulate it, can make laws about it. And like I said, this is the clause used to pass a majority of the laws in the United States. So the big three that you're going to need to know from Section 8, the powers of Congress, where do they get that? And when people ask you or argue about it, you can tell them, number one, the Interstate Commerce Clause. They can make lots of laws because most everything goes over state lines. Number two, necessary and proper clause to execute those powers listed in Section 8. They can make any law necessary and proper to do that. And thirdly, the general welfare clause. We can do that for the general welfare of the country. Have fun on the worksheet, and we'll look forward to the discussion tomorrow.